we should always stand and support our own. We should not be quick to join the world in criticizing.
Undercover reporters posing as Chinese criminals meet one of Zimbabwe's most senior diplomats.
Is it about doing dirty jobs for government, laundering money?
Right now I can put some bag like this with 1.2 billion and put a red tape written diplomat. That's it.
Actually, when ministers get involved in these things and it comes to public life, the church is supposed to be the first to come out and condemn the act.
This is why when it comes to this, I never fail. Do you know why I never fail to prophesy? Because I decide whatever I like. Too bad if you don't like my team and I don't like your team. Too bad if I don't like you. I can just come here and say this one is winning.
It's a critique, and let's talk about Uebert Angel. It's been in the news in some scandal, and it's really unfortunate. I'd largely shied away from doing something on Uebert Angel. It's come up a number of times. Of course, it's always in the news, but I largely shied away from doing anything about him. In fact, some 2 months ago, I was actually putting something together. I was going to do a video on prosperity gospel, and Uebert Angel features prominently in that video. Not for good anyways, but I just did not have the push. Many times, a couple of thoughts, a couple of ideas come to mind. Sometimes I get this drawback, I really don't get the push to go further. Sometimes I just put it off, sometimes I put it on hold. I'm now seeing the merge that is happening with him now. I think I'm now beginning to see exactly why I didn't really have that push, because this analysis will drive me into the merge I was doing with the prosperity gospel video. So I can already predict that this will have parts, and we'll probably get into the prosperity gospel in the church, because what is happening with Uebert Angel right now is a symptom or a ripple effect of the anomalies that usually go with the prosperity gospel. And before I get into this analysis proper, I want to say this. I'm saying this because of the much that happened with the Duncan Williams videos I did before now. Some persons had issues with all of that. Obviously, they follow those ministers that I did the critique on, and they probably got offended. That's fine. That's fine. What I do here is try to be very objective, try to test principles, test doctrines, test personalities. And then people accuse me of doing this for ulterior motive. I've largely shied away from critique, even though I know that critique is a major part of what I do here. And I need to say this: what I do here is not even easy for me, actually. What I'm doing now is an idea that I have had for almost 8 years now, but I really didn't get it pushed because I know that critique will be a major part of it. I have largely shied away from doing it because of the critique aspect of it. And I'm not surprised with the merge that is happening. I know that I've not even seen anything yet because I've actually not even done so much with critiquing. And I want to say this categorically. I love the church. I actually think I love the church more than a number of you who keep raising issues and all of that. And some persons say, oh, this is about views and all of that. If I wanted views, in the last 1 month, a whole lot has happened in the church. Issues have been trending. I could have jumped on all of that. I can mention some right away. There's been the Uebert Angel 2 has been in the news with the Sinach and Waymaker song. He jumped on the trend that Pastor Chris started with Sinach, and that was trending. I had thoughts to share on that. I had my own thoughts to share, but I really didn't get the push. In fact, I had started writing script for the video, but I just didn't get the push to continue. Usually I just think that is God restraining me, and I let it be. It's there. The script is actually still there, Then there was the Uebert Angel, Apostle Arome Osayi. That was when Apostle Arome Osayi criticized the miracle money trend, and Uebert Angel replied with all of those shenanigans and the merge that he did, and even some derogatory stuff and all of that. That was trending. I had thoughts to share on that. Actually, I was writing script already, but again, I just didn't get the push, so I stopped. With this happening now, I'm beginning to think maybe the Lord wanted me to just hold on and probably be able to put all of that together properly in order to communicate the most that He probably wants me to communicate, especially with this happening now. So if it was about views and getting prominent, I could jump on all of that, and I can tell you categorically that those videos would have done well in terms of views. They would have done well, but I didn't jump on those trends. So when people say this is about views, sometimes, I think we need to bring objectivity to bear in the engagement that we'll be having here. Let me restate. Basically, what I do here on Pleroma Culture is projecting the kingdom, projecting kingdom principles, projecting kingdom ideas, helping Christians with material that they can use to really come to the full measure the stature of Christ, exposing wrong doctrines, discussing principles and ideas and doctrines in the faith, discussing personalities too, because when you talk about principles, you talk about doctrine, you talk about ideas, usually they stand, they come from personalities, many times leaders in the faith. So we'll talk about them And if we have to critique, we critique, and then everybody can learn and we can, derive whatever we want to derive. And, and I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not going to be shy to do the much that I feel that I am being led to do. And I tell you the truth, having to do this is not easy, having to criticize. And in fact, after the Tom and William videos, I largely shied away from doing critique, even though sometimes I actually even get the push to do it. But again, I'm not going to hold back. But I thank God for the courage that He has given me to do this, and I continue to pray for more grace and more courage to do the much that He really wants me to do. And again, I ask, like Paul would ask the Jews, who would I rather obey, God or man? So as much as I expect you to bring a lot of objectivity to this platform, again, I will not be shy nor afraid to do all of the critique if I have to. So let's get into the analysis. Uebert Angel. Uebert Angel has become really prominent even in Nigeria, and in case you don't know him, he's a British Zimbabwean who runs a church in Britain. He calls himself a prophet, and he's the founder of the Spirit Embassy in the UK, and these days is always in the news. Unfortunately, this time, this is very sad. I consider this really, really sad for him and the church. So Jezeera has been doing this, of course you know Jezeera, they're very prominent for investigative journalism, especially as it has to do with African news. Apparently they've been doing some work in Zimbabwe, trying to look at corruption and embezzlement and all of that in Zimbabwe. And you know that Zimbabwe is quite rich in gold, and there's been a lot of mafia activity, a lot of illegal activities in the gold mining, just like we have in Nigeria, oil theft, illegal refinery, and all of that. So they had that in Zimbabwe too, and apparently Jezeera has been following that up, and they just released one of their investigations with Uebert Angel featuring. Now, Uebert Angel is an envoy, an ambassador at large of Zimbabwe to Europe and the Americas. Apparently, he's been negotiating deals for Zimbabwe and all of that. But in this case, you have undercover journalists who are posing as Chinese criminals, and they're actually negotiating an illegal deal, illegal purchase of gold, and with the sum to be smuggled into Zimbabwe. And you can see the role that Uebert Angel is playing in all of this illegal transaction. And it's sad to see a preacher who also calls himself a prophet getting involved in this.
A senior diplomat from Zimbabwe has agreed to launder more than $1 billion in cash in what he believed to be a meeting with Chinese gangsters. Al Jazeera's investigative unit has found the diplomat was videotaped making the offer in a meeting with undercover reporters as part of an investigation by Al Jazeera into networks in Africa that use gold to launder vast sums of money. Uebert Angel is a British Zimbabwean businessman and the presidential envoy. He claims to have made it to the Africa Forbes Rich list in 2013. His net worth is around $60 million, and he calls himself the prophet of success. Alexander James has this exclusive report.
Good to see you, Ambassador.
Undercover reporters posing as Chinese criminals meet one of Zimbabwe's most senior diplomats.
Yeah. An ambassador at large, I'm ambassador to 85 countries, but I'm the special envoy. I'm a representative of the president. That means I can sign contracts, I can sign treaties with government without the president getting involved.
Woman with a trip neck.
Uebert Angel is also an evangelical preacher
Fire the Holy Ghost.
who says he has the gift of prophecy with powers to heal the sick.
It takes the power of God, but it takes somebody to believe for something to happen like this.
Angel was personally appointed by President Emerson Mnangagwa to bring investment into Zimbabwe.
He is my first ambassador at large assigned to promote Zimbabwe brand.
Zimbabwe's economy has been devastated by corruption and more than 2 decades of sanctions imposed by the United States and Europe. The local currency has no international value. The country's biggest earner of US dollars is gold.
You want a gold? Gold, we can do it right now. We can make the call right now, and it's done with the president of Miners Association right this minute.
The president of Zimbabwe's Miners Federation is Henrietta Rushweya.
They want to invest in gold and buy gold and maybe send a private jet, picks up gold every week.
That's perfect. No, that's okay. Let's do it, bro.
$5 million can be cleaned every week.
We get gold worth $5 million every week. We take it out, bring another $5 million.
The ambassador is not bothered that the cash is being laundered.
It's money that cannot be declared in the country of origin.
We don't want to talk about.
He explains a plan to smuggle the dirty cash into Zimbabwe using his diplomatic status.
Right now, I can put a bag like this with 1.2 billion and put a red tape written diplomat. That's it.
Under the Vienna Convention, states agree to exempt diplomatic luggage from airport searches.
It's a very, very easy thing. It will land in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe can't touch it until I get to my house. Yeah. You can understand. So they can be a diplomatic plane.
Ambassador Angel, Henrietta Rushweya, and President Mnangagwa did not respond to our request for comment. Alexander James, Al Jazeera.
Being in the limelight for all of this negativity is a lot of problem for the church, and it is unfortunate. Now let me say this quickly. I am not a fan of Uebert Angel. I'm always not shy to say this. I am not a fan of Uebert Angel because seeing who he is, practices, and how he has conducted himself, I actually consider Uebert Angel false. Again, I say it by what I know as a Christian and by the standards that I have learned as a Christian and what I know is proper. I do not consider Uebert Angel a genuine preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ. I actually consider him as false. And like I said, I've had the push to do videos on him, but a number of times when I get to work and want to do it, I just have this restraint, and that's why you're probably not seeing me come here to talk about Uebert Angel. I actually believe it's false. That is my own verdict on Uebert Angel. I don't believe he is a genuine preacher by his own activities and conduct and practices. And I think these things are not difficult to know. Jesus said, by their fruits you shall know them. Sometimes I don't know how Christians struggle with these things. Sometimes they argue with you and then they question your audacity, call a preacher out and tag the person false. Or these things are pretty easy. I don't know why people struggle with them. As far as I'm concerned, I say it again, Uebert Angel is false. By what I know as a Christian, he is false. And I challenge anybody to a debate on Uebert Angel, and I can prove categorically that that man is false.
Most of you think I prophesy football sometimes. Sometimes I don't. Half of it is prophecy. Half of it is me making the team win or lose. Oh, this is the truth. I just decide. This is why when it comes to this, I never fail. Do you know why I never fail to prophesy? Because I decide whatever I like. Too bad if you don't like my team and I don't like your team. Too bad if I don't like you. I can just come here and say this one is winning.
And please, if you are new to the channel, I really would love you to subscribe. If you're watching this video right now, do not forget to drop a like. Please drop a comment. I want to hear your thoughts. I intend for this to be a conversation. It will be awesome to continue the conversation in the comment section. So please drop a comment. And when you do this, it helps this video to also have a further reach so that other people can get to see the much that I'm doing here. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your support. It is the least you can do to support me. Now people say, oh well, we should always stand and support our own. We should not be quick to join the world in criticizing. Oh, these people hate the church. Oh, these people don't like the church. Always after ministers and all of that. Hey, you don't have to tell me. I know that the world doesn't like the church. Who likes Jesus? Nobody likes Jesus. The world don't like Jesus. But don't tell me that they're after ministers. No, they are not. Yeah, I understand that the world doesn't like the church. Of course, I know that. I probably know that better than you. But you see, when ministers misbehave, you really think that the church has a responsibility to go shield them. No, you have it all wrong. It's not true. Actually, when ministers get involved in these things and it comes to public life, the church is supposed to be the first to come out and condemn the act. Yes, that is the will of God. Like this Uebert Angel situation, the church in Zimbabwe is supposed to come out first to condemn the act and disassociate themselves. That, hey, this is not who we are. This is not the life of Christ. This is not Christian behavior. We totally condemn this. Of course, if you want to give help to Christians who probably fall and into trouble, especially situations like this, of course you can. But in public, the church must condemn. It is not the job of the church to go and do solidarity like we're a club or something. No, because we serve a God of order. We serve a God of justice. We serve a God of integrity, righteousness. When you hear righteousness, oh, I'm the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus, what do you think that means? What do you think that means? Now, this situation, you don't know how much it costs God and the church. No, some of you don't know the implication of the much that Uebert Angel has done now and the likes. Ministers do things, sometimes they get involved in some sexual escapade and all of that, and it comes to public light and people think that the church should come and shield. No, if you know the implication of the much that they are doing on the church, you probably want to have a second thought. It is not the job of the church to come out and defend the wrongs of Christians, especially leaders in church. Actually, the job of the church is to come out and condemn it, stating proper Christian conduct. Why? Because we set the standard. The church sets the standard for the world. Now, imagine what is happening in Zimbabwe right now with Uebert Angel. Now, the gospel that Uebert Angel represents. So when you go to Zimbabwe and you're preaching, and you're saying, oh, come to Christ, come to the church, come and receive the salvation of Christ. What you're saying is that, hey, come, Christ will change your life. Come and receive the standard principle of righteousness. The life that will create a situation where your gold will no longer be stolen. You have people in government who will serve your interest. People in government with integrity who will serve your interest. So the very thing that Uebert Angel and the gospel that he preaches promises that he's supposed to change is exactly what he's doing right now. What do you think the gospel is about? No, some of you need to really have a bigger picture. You need to grow up. You think the gospel is about you making some money, buying a good car, getting married, building a house. You need to wake up and really look at the bigger picture. Oh, let's not criticize. In 1 Corinthians 5:9-13, see what Paul says. Paul basically saying the church must not condone irresponsibility in believers. See Paul's position. You probably are more holy and more considerate than Paul. When I rose to you before, I told you not to associate with people who indulge in sexual sins, but I wasn't talking about unbelievers. Paul says I wasn't talking about unbelievers, but I wasn't talking about unbelievers who indulge in sexual sins or are greedy or cheat people or worship idols. Now it continues. You would have to leave this world to avoid people like that. I meant that you are not to associate with anyone who claims to be a believer yet indulges in sexual sin or is greedy or worships idols, or is abusive, or is a drunkard, or cheats people. Did you hear that? So Paul is actually saying we can pardon unbelievers, but yet we shouldn't do the same for believers. Now let's continue. Now Paul says, don't even eat with such people. Really? Don't even eat with such people? Wow. What a standard. So you probably are more, considerate than Paul. You probably have a deeper revelation than Paul does. Now see what Paul says again. It isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders, but it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside the church who are sinning. So that's Paul for you. So the question is, do you have a deeper revelation than this? So I insist, when these things happen, the church should be the first to come out and speak and condemn the act. And in fact, not just condemn the act, the church must also insist that the law should take its course. That is God. That is righteousness. Something happened in Nigeria a couple of years ago where certain people, Christians supposedly, senior bank officials, got involved in some economic sabotage, breaking the laws. And then it was said that certain senior people in church intervened and they were stopped from prosecution. I tell you the truth. If it is true that those people broke the law and then they involved in economic sabotage, contrary to the law, violating the laws of the land, what those ministers have done is to hold back the hand of reproof of God. Because even the laws of the states, they are instruments in the hand of God to punish sinners. So when you break the law, it is expected that the justice is meted to you and you suffer the consequence according to the provisions of the law. If you use alternative means contrary to the law to stop anyone from prosecution, what you have done is a sin. You're not just sin against the state, you are sin against God. You have actually stopped the hand of God of chastisement because, of course, these people if they are Christians, they did something wrong. The Lord says, whom I love, I chastise. So the hand of discipline of the Lord is that they face the consequence many times. So when you try to stop them, you have not done them any good and you have actually sinned. And I tell you the truth, God will call you to account for all of that. So let Christians not think that, we have a job to side with evil. No. Because we serve a God of justice. It is not our job to come out and protest and say, oh no, they are winching the church. They are not winching the church. It is Uebert Angel who got involved in illegal activities, taking public monies that belong to Zimbabweans. That's a very poor country. He is supposed to be a minister of light. And what a church founder, a minister, is doing as a special envoy, as an ambassador. I don't understand it. To work with government at that level, a church founder, a preacher, a teacher of the word, who also calls himself a prophet. Like, how do those two jobs connect? So is it about doing dirty jobs for government, laundering monies? And then you come out with all the braggadocious attitude and like you're some drug lord. So if people at that level in the church, at that high level, can get involved in crime at that level, then there's a problem. And it's not something that the church should be quiet about. Oh, you say they're after the church. They are not after the church. They are doing their job. They are journalists. It is called investigative journalism, unraveling corruption. Just as they do their job, you too, as a minister of the gospel, as a minister of the kingdom, you too ought to be doing your job, preaching truth, righteousness, so that corruption, stealing of public funds, money laundering can be eradicated from society. But instead, you have become part of the very problem that the gospel is supposed to solve. And then you make the church a subject of mockery. And then you think you won't get judgment from God. And then you want the world to buy into the gospel that we preach. You must be a joker.
Most journalists in this country that have come across this information are afraid to report about it because they will be thrown into prison. I've been thrown into prison myself 3 times. And one of the reasons that I was thrown into prison is because Henrietta Rishwaya, who is the president's niece and who has been exposed in this documentary film by Al Jazeera, was also caught at Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe International Airport in October of 2020, trying to smuggle 6.7 kilograms of gold to Dubai. When she was caught, she was offered a bail deal where the state would not oppose bail. And when I exposed that, I was arrested, thrown into prison for 25 days. And so a lot of journalists are afraid to report on these issues because they look at what has happened to me and they are afraid of being thrown into prison because nobody is able to help them out. But now that Al Jazeera has put this information out, it's important for local journalists to look at it and report on it because it's not coming from them, it's coming from an international news network.
Has there been any response, any official response from people in Zimbabwe?
Well, the government has not responded officially, but the ruling party has used one of its Twitter handles to dismiss the film on the basis that it does not involve a government minister or it does not involve a civil servant. But the fact of the matter is, as Al Jazeera said in its press release, there are 4 films. So we are still waiting to see what else comes. But the fact that the ambassador at large who was appointed by the president of the republic, President Emerson Mnangagwa, is involved not only in the smuggling of gold or laundering of money, but also charging people to have access to the president is criminal. So we are now waiting to see whether the government is going to prosecute these people. But we are not hopeful based on what has happened in the past.
So this whole, thing about they're after the church. No, it is the preachers, our preachers. People who pose to be teachers, preachers in the church are the real problem. In this situation are the ones actually after the church, doing the church great disservice. And 1 Corinthians 5, Paul has said, we should rather even pardon unbelievers who sin. Why? Because you have received a spirit, the spirit of righteousness, to live at a certain standards, to operate at a certain standards when it comes to character and behavior. Come on, the world don't know how to do better. What do you expect? They sin. That's what they do. So you understand why Paul says, hey, I pardon them. But for the church, Paul says, don't even eat with them. Now, in this situation, he was actually a believer. Now imagine if this happens at the leadership level, an apostle, a preacher, getting involved in crime at that level. Imagine a preacher, getting involved in oil theft in Nigeria, negotiating for Nigerian crude to be moved abroad and stashing money, laundering money to be received in his house is unfortunate. Now, I don't know the kind of Christ that some people received. No, because the one that I know, the God that I know, the standards of righteousness are high. Some of you probably think God is some joker. You can just live. If you know the implication and the righteousness of God in Christ Jesus, and if you know the implication of that statement, you will walk with God with fear and trembling. If you know the demands of righteousness, then you know the God that you serve. Do you know? And then you treat these things with levity. Oh, they are after the church. Oh, we are all sinners. Oh, these things happen and all of that. Now, let me just give you an idea of the God that you claim to serve. The God of justice, the God of righteousness. Deuteronomy 32:4 says, He is the rock, His works are perfect, and all His ways are just. A faithful God who does no wrong, upright and just. Psalms 11:7 says of our God, the Lord is righteous, He loves justice. And these are the standards that are demanded of you. Because if we claim we are the children of God by faith in Christ Jesus, and that we have the Spirit of God in us, those things are not abstract statements. They are statements that have practical implication on the kind of lives we live. Now, Psalm 147:6-8 says, of our God, the maker of heaven and earth, upholds the cause of the oppressed and loves the righteous. Isaiah 5:16. The Lord Almighty will be exalted by his justice. Now, do we err? Of course we err. We make mistakes. We make mistakes. It's not a holier than thou, disposition. Again, I'm not afraid to state the demands of righteousness that is expected of us. I usually tell people, hey, the fact that we fall short of the demands of righteousness, it doesn't mean that we should deny that they exist. I say it again. The fact that we have shortcomings and that sometimes we can fall short of the demands of righteousness, it doesn't mean that we deny that they truly exist. It doesn't mean that we lower the standards. Rather, we should acknowledge it, embrace it, while we continue to depend on God for more grace to live up to the standards that He requires of us. Because it is not by power, neither is it by might, it is by the Spirit, says the Lord. For without Him, we can do nothing. We can do nothing. For it is the grace of God, lest any man should boast. So of course we know we are not attaining these standards by our strength. It is by the grace that He supplies. And we have that grace supplied enough to live the life. So this analysis is not ended. This conversation is not ended. We'll continue this in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. Please feel free, whether in support or against, whatever you have to say concerning this. I really love to hear your thoughts. I don't know Uebert Angel, it's not even from Nigeria, but by their fruits, we shall know them. This is about the gospel. These are kingdom matters. So there's no emotions to these things. And I need to take patience. In the days that we live in, I keep saying it, these are the days to take sides. A number of you follow your preachers with emotions. In very clear matters, you side with your ministers against Christ, against the church. You do that every time. Even though you still come out and claim holier than thou and and try to criticize people like us and call us names and all of that, the more that I do, as far as I'm concerned, I am less to do. And I know exactly what I'm doing here. You really have to reevaluate and think whether it is Christ you want to follow or a man. Or even Paul would say, follow me as I follow Christ. So guys, welcome to the channel. It's Pleroma Culture. Basically, we'll talk about faith and faith-related matters, talk about church matters within Nigeria, in Africa, and all around the world. Faith matters, basically, that is what the channel is about. Please jump on it. These are little community, a little, church. Like Christ did say, where 2, 3 are gathered, I am there, and indeed, it's a church. So come on, join this little community and let's have some really wonderful conversation.